Okay, good afternoon, folks, and welcome to our session on selling and marketing to the government. Um, I think that the folks at NIPA are actually going to be advancing our slides for us today. So if that's the case, if we could go to our first slide, that would be handy. Yep. Oh, actually, I guess the second slide. Hi, guys, that's me. I'm your presenter today. And we're joined also by Aziza Gamble from the Power Authority, who will be helping us with questions. So if you've got a question, please use the Q&A button on the bottom of your screen. It says Q&A. You can type your questions in there. So if we can go one more slide, please. Okay, there's a lot of programs out there that'll help contractors, particularly minority and women business enterprises and small businesses. And there's a specific definition for small business in the federal rules. And it helps you to compete and to obtain local, state, and federal supply, service, or construction contracts. Now, notwithstanding all of this, you still need a customer. You still need somebody who wants to do business with you. Programs like bid links within the Small Business Development Center can help you be aware of bid opportunities, but bid opportunities only apply when a purchase is above a certain amount or when it involves a certain type of work. The government spends a tremendous amount of money that's not necessarily on a published bid basis. Also, if you've got a product that the government may not know they need, for example, a new type of street light or some such thing that's more energy efficient, well, you need to sell somebody on having them purchase those to install them because they can save on electricity. So you're basically, as a supplier to the government, a couple of things that you need to understand. Your certifications, MWBE, certified as a small business. There are a number of certifications and lots of agencies to help you decide which ones make sense for you. Use the certifications. The government needs businesses that are certified because we have targets that we have to comply with. So to comply with the target, we need to deal with small businesses, minority businesses, women-owned businesses. So it's important for you to be registered so we know who we're dealing with. It's important that you develop awareness in the market space of what your product is and what it does. Somebody has to know that you've got the newest, fanciest computer, that you've got the most energy efficient lighting, whatever it is. You have to raise that awareness. And part and parcel of that is then selling that. Everything, the government's just another customer. There's more paperwork involved and they pay their bills a little better, so you have lower risk, but you're still selling, you're still meeting a need somewhere. So what's the need in the market space that your product is meeting? So understand that. Understand the bid, bond, and insurance process. Like I say, not everything is a bid. For many of the smaller companies, probably a lot of the companies on the call today with us, you might get a telephone request. It's called an RFQ, request for quote. And a purchasing agent will call you up and say, hey, Tom, we're looking to buy these particular headsets. And I say, okay, we have those headsets. They're $4 a piece. They might call 3 other companies and say, hey, we're looking for headsets. What's your price? Somebody says $405. Somebody says $425. They'll call back and say, Tom, we like your price. We want to order so many headsets. That's an informal process. So you have to understand that it's not always just a bid process to do government business. There are also standard supply contracts. If you're a small hardware store and you're located, for example, near a SUNY or CUNY campus, we will actually do contracts with a hardware store that we will purchase stuff at X% discount, off your regular shelf price. And we'll send people in that need to get a can of paint, need to get a valve handle, need to get this, need to get that. So there's lots of different ways the government does business. You need to understand what those processes are for your product in your space. So marketing, operations, and management. How are you marketing your product? How are you supplying your product? How are you manufacturing and producing it? Who's managing all of these efforts for you? These are things that you need to understand in your business context. And there's lots of resources out there to help you, not just to plug SBDC, but I will since I work for SBDC. The New York State Small Business Development Center provides free confidential assistance to businesses. And it takes lots of forms from planning, defining opportunities, helping you define what those operations are, and things of that nature. So use all the resources that are out there. The New York Power Authority and the Canal Corporation have lots of internal resources to help companies do business with them. They're looking for people to do business with them And you say, well, why? Well, because if there's 5 people supplying paint, I might get a better price. If I have 6 people supplying paint, I might get an even better price. Or I'll get better delivery, I'll get better service. So they're always looking for the largest possible number of suppliers. And since we all work for the government on this side of the table, we have targets. We want to support minority and small business owners. So we're always looking for folks that will meet those needs for us. Slide, please. So need starts everything. Your product has to meet a need somewhere. If you sell books and you're selling school books, well, you got to go let schools know that you're out there and you're a book dealer because they need books. The government, fortunately, is its own world. The government buys, the old joke is they buy everything from Band-Aids to bullets to bombs to airplanes. Governments do buy, literally they buy religious articles because governments operate hospitals. The Veterans Administration actually operates hospitals. Those hospitals have a chapel. That chapel might need religious decoration. So there's really very few things that the government doesn't buy. Marijuana is still one of them with the federal government. So even in New York, sorry, it's going to be legal, but the feds won't be buying it anytime soon. But need starts everything. So what need does your product or service meet? Then define, okay, who in the government is the most likely to want to purchase that? Is it someone in the education sector? Is it someone in public administration, highway department, recreation department in a local town? Who is it that's going to need your stuff? And then understand what their process is going to be after you, on the right side, we talk about developing active interest. Can you interest somebody on the municipal side of life in your product or service, that yours is better? One of the things we talk about in business plans, what does your product have? Is it better, faster, neater, cheaper, cleaner, smoother? Does it have better features? Does it have better benefits? What does it do what does your product do that my product doesn't do? So, you've got to convince somebody that you're doing that and outdoing your competition. Then you have to make sure your business is organized and responsive. Does somebody answer the phone? Always approach your business from the customer perspective, not from your perspective. You know your business, you run your business. How does your customer see your business? When they dial your number, does somebody pick up the phone like, yo? Or does somebody pick up the phone and say, hey, thanks for calling Tom's Supply Company. If you need it, we got it. How are you answering the phone? How are you responding to your customer? Then we get into the other stages of procurement, like a purchase requisition. That's where somebody such as myself, I'm director of the SBDC. I would write a requisition that says, okay, I need to get this type of telephone system, which we recently did, buy a new phone system. So I have to requisition that and say, this is what I'm looking to get. That requisition is then going to be reviewed by the purchasing folks who might reach out to you. If you came to see me and said, Tom, I have the coolest new phone systems, you really should get a phone system that does this, this, and this. So they might reach out to you. Depending on what's going to happen with the requisition, it's then going to go through the solicitation process. And the solicitation is, if it's over a certain amount of money, maybe it's going to go what's called RFP, request for proposal. Maybe it's going to go RFQ, request for quote. RFQ is frequently done in writing, but can be done by phone. So what's the process going to be? And as you're selling someone from the government, they'll tell you what that process is going to be. They'll say, hey, Tom, this is definitely going to go through RFP. It's going to be a whole bid and everything else because of the dollar value. It's capital equipment. It's this, it's that, it's whatever. So understand what is the solicitation process your product in your market deals with. Know your market, know your customer. Then there's going to be the evaluation of the contract. They're going to evaluate and say, okay, are you a qualified supplier? Do you exist? Do you have a tax ID number? Hopefully you do. If you don't, you're probably not going to do business with the government. Depending on what kind of business, you might need what's called a SAM number, which is free to get. It's like another number that identifies your business, but identifies associated banking relationships with it. Your local SBDC can help you figure out how to get your SAM. Like I say, it's a free thing to get. You have to have it to do certain types of business with certain agencies. So, that's part of this whole contract process then. Is this going to be a simple purchase order where they just send you or fax you or email you a purchase order that says, hey, yeah, we want, 5 of those light bulb things that you have. Okay, great. Your billing instructions will be on there and everything else. Make sure you read and understand what your contract says. your contract is likely going to say you have to deliver by a certain date, you got to deliver a certain way, you got to pack it a certain way, et cetera. Read it. It's the government. Not to say that you can never win when you fight with the government, but it's really hard to win when you fight with the government. If they say they want it packed 2 to a box, pack it 2 to a box. Don't say, well, we only pack it 4 to a box. The government's gonna say, okay, good, we'll find someone who does 2 to a box. So keep in mind it is a customer. Invoicing and disputes. You have to invoice them promptly. In most cases nowadays, it's really easy to do business with the government. There's lots of laws about how the government has to pay its bills. The government prefers to pay nowadays using what are called P cards. As far as most of us that don't use a P card are concerned, it's a credit card. They're going to call you and say, okay, this is a MasterCard, here's the number, here's the expiration date, here's the name on it, here's your CVV, the code on the back or front, depending which card it is. So your business, if you want to do business with the government, you may have to talk to your bank about accepting credit cards because that's their preferred method for paying for things. If there's a dispute, you were supposed to ship 8 pieces, you shipped 7, you got 1 on back order. Technically not really a dispute, but it kind of falls into that category. Understand in your space with your customers how that is handled. It's important that you know that. The last stage of procurement is record keeping. How long do you have to keep invoices? How long is your warranty period? Questions like that will come up. Again, these are all the things that you need to do to properly run your business anyway. So make sure you've got a handle on it when you're trying to do business with the government. Slide, please. We've talked about knowing your market, knowing your context. What is your market space? Who are the decision makers? How are you going to identify them? How are you going to communicate with them? Is this like a mass market thing where you're just going to take out a billboard in Albany because everybody in the government drives past it? Are you going to do direct mail? Are you going to do ads in trade magazines? Are you going to do trade shows? Are you going to go to events like this where there is a matchmaker function a little later on so you can say to the folks at NIPA, hey, I'm here, I do this. But you've got to know what your strategy is going to be. Who are you going to reach? How are you going to reach them? How are you going to develop relationships with those people? How are they going to know, okay, if I want to buy those cool new light bulbs, those new LED thingies, Tom's the guy to see. Tom really knows what these LED thingies do, and he can help us out with them, whatever. How are you going to develop relationships? Keep in mind, of course, relationships involve things like product knowledge, customer service, things like that. It doesn't involve anything improper. The government is a very straight up customer. You need to be a straight up supplier for them. How are you going to raise product awareness? How are you going to communicate what needs you're meeting for your customer? How are you going to help your customer understand? Again, put your mind from the perspective of purchaser, not the perspective of supplier. You know what your product is. You know what it does. You know how it works. You have to make me comfortable with your product, that I understand what it's doing. Flipping the book a little bit, even with that, what are the rules of your market space? How are things generally sold in your market space? For example, if you're selling office equipment, is it sold through distributors? Is it sold through local companies that can also provide service? Some of those rules might be written, they might be unwritten. Some of the rules are just the practices that take place in that market. Understand what they are, because you need to know what your competition's doing. So if somebody says, hey, Tom, we really like those copiers that you guys sell, but Aziz has got these other copiers that do pretty much the same stuff, but she sells all her stuff, through these guys that are like on every other block in every city that we have an office in. So like we can get parts right away, we get service right away. With you, there's like nobody to service it. So understand what your competition is. Learn from your competition. If they're out there doing business with the government, and we'll talk at one point about how you can do requests and find out who is doing business with the government, understand what they're doing that makes them attractive to the government. You might have to do some of those things, and maybe you can do some of those things better. Maybe you're more responsive than a big company. Maybe you can move more quickly than a big company. So, understand that market space that you're operating in. Understand also what your pre and post sale requirements are going to be with the government. we've all heard the horror stories about the government buying spare parts for $1 gazillion and hammers and whatever, and toilet seats for a couple of $100 and that sort of stuff. Well, that's because when the government buys something, they might be putting that on an airplane, for the military or whatever. And well, we need spare parts for it. And we don't want to order a spare part and find it's going to take us 12 weeks to get it. We're going to buy some spare parts now. They also, if they're buying something new, particularly for those of you that are involved in or sort of technology products, how do they use it? Are you providing training? Are you providing support? Define what your warranty is. You're going to find that some agencies will only buy things that have at least X for a warranty, or their policy is that it must have at least this kind of warranty. Understand what those requirements are, such that when that purchasing person calls you up and says, hey, Aziza, you won that contract with us, and we're going to be sending you some paperwork, so send us a copy of your warranty. And you're going to be sitting there saying, warranty? What's a warranty? No, so you have to know what that is and understand what it is in your market space. If everybody else that's selling that product in the government has a 1-year warranty, you probably have to have at least a 1-year warranty also. So again, understanding your space, that as much as the government buys things on bids and on quotes and everything else, the government needs to know what they need to buy. So you need to create customers with the government. Slide, please.
We have a question about government retention for records.
Yep.
Is it still 7 years?
It depends. I realize this is going to be like the most useless answer in the world. Many records with the government are 7 years from last touch. However, tax records, for certain tax records, are 3 years from an unaudited touch. So if you want, I guess there'll be contact info somewhere in the course of today's event for you guys. If not, I'll do the shameless plug for SBDC. You can reach us at 845-356-6065. Once again, that's 845-356-6065. We can answer that question in your circumstance because, for example, technical information on a product still in use by the government, you have to retain that as long as they're using that product. I used to be involved in electronics that were sold to the military. As long as that product was in use, we had to maintain spare parts and documentation for it. And we had to maintain purchase documentation. So a lot's going to depend on what you're selling. If you're at the local hardware store and you sell them a couple of valves for the plumbing maintenance person to use, yeah, you probably have to save stuff for like 90 days. But yeah, it will change from area to area. So give us a yell, we'll tell you exactly what is in your space. Okay, certifications. There's a couple of different kinds of certifications. One of these we're looking at here today is MWBE, Minority Women Business Enterprise, or Disadvantaged Business Enterprise, and small businesses. Small is a very specific definition in federal law. The rule of thumb we use is 500 employees or less. It changes from business to business. New York has a different definition of small business. So, reach out for a resource. We'll tell you exactly what it is in your business and in your particular geography. It's important as a sales tool. It doesn't guarantee you any business. It's a business support. It's also not a preference. If my product's $1 and you're a minority business, your product's $1.05, they're not buying yours at $1.05 if mine's $1. Some localities do have some preference programs for local suppliers that are geographically local to them, where governments want to spend money in their own area. There's a handful of preferences out there. You can look up and see where they are, and we can help you find that. But in general, you still need to be competitive. The benefit, and you say, well, what's the point of like going through 2 days of work, making copies of stuff and sending it in to get my MWBE certification, or my DBE certification? The advantage is they want to do business with you. They're going to pick up the phone and call you because when they're looking for someone that sells light bulbs, they're going to the light bulb section of the MWBE directory and say, oh, Aziza sells light bulbs. Let me call up Aziza and see, what she has in this particular bulb that we need to buy. It's another marketing tool for your company. It's not a guarantee. The 8A program, whole separate issue. The 8A program is a guarantee. They set up a certain amount of business for you, but we're not doing that one today. But this helps you, because when you're calling up and saying, I want to go talk to Tom because I think he needs a new phone system and I have the coolest phone systems around, it's one more way you can say to kind of break that ice. by the way, I'm an MWB contractor doing phone systems, and we've got our OGS number or our GSA number. So now I know, okay, you know how to do business with the government because you got your OGS or your GSA numbers. And oh, I'm in the MWB directory. So you're somebody I want to do business with if I need to get a phone system. So again, it's one more tool. There are federal, state, city, and other types of certification. New York City does its own certification. There are some ways to help move that process, which can take a long time. The state of New York is not the fastest entity in the world in terms of doing MWB certifications. It still takes many months to do. But like anything, if you don't start it, you'll never get it. So you better start it and then just be patient with it. But New York City does theirs a little more quickly. Their process is a little bit different. And you've got to be in a certain geography to get a New York City one, but it's worth getting because then you say to New York State, oh, by the way, I have my city certification. It makes life a little bit easier on the other side. If you do highway related construction, there are different federal and state certifications that may or may not be applicable in your space. Understand if it is or if it isn't. Understand the application process and the information required. It's a ton of information. And it has to be real. If you're saying, well, yeah, we're a woman-owned company because my wife owns half the company. Well, half isn't majority woman-owned, so it's got to be 51%. Number one. Number two, the fact that she's your wife and owns the company on paper doesn't mean that she actively manages the business of the company on a day-to-day basis. That's an important thing to understand, that the minority person has to have a serious and real role in the company. They've got to be the signatory on bank accounts. They have to actually show up in the office. They have to be listed on the website. They have to be listed on the letterhead if you list other people on the letterhead. In other words, it's got to be real. The government's going to check this out and say, I mean, you're going to be sending in, when you do your MWB application, you send in a tremendous amount of information, including copies of your vehicle registrations for vehicles that the business might own or operate. Because the government's saying, okay, if we're going to try to reach out to you and try to give you these supports as a certified contractor, then we want to make sure you're really what you say you are. They're going to validate addresses, locations, all sorts of other stuff. So please, don't play games with it. Just, you got to be square up with it. And like I say, it's a sales tool. It's not a guarantee. It's something that helps government people that purchase things know who they should be talking to, and they will try to assist you in the process as much as they can in the scope of what they do. Slide, please. Okay, we're getting down to our last couple minutes and our last 17 slides, I think. No, we only have 2 left, actually, so it won't be too bad. We'll get them through pretty quick. Okay, MWB programs don't survive in a vacuum. In other words, it's a certification. It's a piece of paper. It's like a driver's license. It's handy, but how often do you actually take it out of your wallet or take it out of your pocket? Unless you travel at the airport, in which case take it out every 3 seconds. But outside of that, you only take it out when something happens. It's the same kind of thing here. You have to have a business that is functioning effectively. It's got qualified management. It is successful. The government doesn't want to do business with companies that aren't going to be here next Tuesday. Because if I buy it this week and I need it serviced next Tuesday, I need somebody here to do it. So, as you're selling your services, make sure you are explaining what you do. If project management is involved in what you sell, how do you do that? Do you have field operations to worry about? I mean, is this construction? Is it repair? Is it fixing the water main that broke on our campus yesterday? Things like that. How do you control those field operations, your site operations? Do you have the proper permits? One of our client companies deals with construction equipment that requires a permit to move it across the street. They actually have an entire permit department. 3 people that do nothing but get permits and licenses to do what they need to do. How is your company managed financially? Do you have your SAM number? Do you have your EIN number? Do you have New York State tax number? Do you pay your taxes? The government will look up and say, okay, we want to do business with this company. Let's see if they're properly doing business with us. They can look it up and see, well, wait a minute, this guy's never even filed a tax return. We may not want to deal with Tom because he doesn't even file a tax return. So make sure you square up with all your stuff. Make sure you got a business plan so you know what you're doing. We talk about business planning, and we're SBDC. We do a lot of business planning with clients. It's important that you know what you're doing, that's your roadmap to success is your business plan. It helps you define how you're going to sell things, how you're going to respond to that sale, what kind of resources you need to do that. What's your professional team? If you're doing an engineering or technical product, do you have certified engineers and technicians? Do you have legal and financial and other supportive people backing up your business? All of those things are essential to your success overall with any customer. They become more so in dealing with the government. Slide, please. This is the one slide where we get really kind of specific. If your product is something that is going to go through a bid process, how do you locate RFPs, requests for proposal? In some cases, you have to pre-qualify for it. They're only going to send it out to people that can actually do it. Like when they bid the new Tappan Zee Bridge, the Mario Cuomo Bridge, they did it by invitation, because what's the point in sending this to everybody? We're only going to send this to people that can actually undertake a $5 billion project. So there's pre-qualifications. There's estimating. They're going to say, okay, here's what we think we need. We're the government. We think this is what we need for a building. How are you going to estimate that? Then there's information sessions where you'll be invited to come see and look. And for example, our campus is doing a renovation on a portion of the campus. One of the information sessions was to invite all the potential bidders to come and look at the space that's being renovated. So, okay, here's where it is. Here's where you'll be parking. Here's how you have to access the space. So you can understand exactly what you're going to need to do in that. Again, what are we doing? We're dealing with a customer. We're selling our services. There's a product called, I shouldn't call it a product, but there's a thing called BidLinks by SBDC. BidLinks goes out and looks at all sorts of bid opportunities every evening. We scan 4,000 databases looking for things where government agencies are saying we need to buy this or buy this. It's completely free, completely confidential. We send you an email and say you may want to talk to the village of Hastings. They're trying to buy new bulbs for their streetlights, whatever. You can decide if you want to do it or not do it. It's up to you. You can learn for the future by studying prior bids, purchases, and RFP activities, and what's called FOIL, Freedom of Information Law requests. That is something under which you can look up what an agency has purchased in the past. So if you sell copy machines, you could actually look up and see how many copy machines did the government buy in the last 10 years? Where'd they buy them? Where'd they put them once they bought them? You know, how'd they service them? Things like that. You can study all that. And let's say you send in a bid. You know, it's a bid that, you know, it might be big for your company, might be small for somebody else. Don't even think about that. If you can handle it, try and get it. Try and sell it. But let's say you miss, you know, bids open up on Monday and you hear that, no, you know, it went to Aziz, it didn't go to me. I can actually ask and say, okay, I'd like to see the outcome of that bid process. And they will send you a sheet that says, okay, Tom, you bid $1 a piece, Aziz bid 95 cents. Now I can see, you know, if I lose a couple of bids like that, I can see, gee, I keep going out at $1 and I keep losing to 95 cents. If I can sell for 95 cents, maybe I should be out there at 95 cents or 94 cents, or maybe I should do free shipping. But you can learn from these prior bids and how they're awarded, how you may have to change your process for doing things. Not all things are like readily accessible. You might have to do a FOIL request. Again, there's a lot of details involved in a FOIL request. You call your local SBDC, will tell you how to do it. We'll give you free advice on how to do it. You still have to pay sometimes for a FOIL request, sometimes a quarter a page for copying. There's sometimes fees. They're not much. They're cents. They're not dollars. So don't worry about that. So the essence of our message today, if you want to sell to the government, that's exactly what you have to do. You have to go sell to the government. You have to create a customer, identify a need. Why is your product better than somebody else's? Why should I use your product? Is your product going to make my job in the government easier, better? Are you going to give me better outcomes in my program? Are you going to give me faster computers, longer lasting tires, cheaper to operate street lamps? You know, what's your product doing? The government is just another customer. They're a pain in the ass to deal with because they've got a lot more paperwork than everybody else is a customer, but they're still a customer. You still have to sell them. They're not going to come to you. You have to go to them. So with that, Aziza, if we have any questions, I'll be happy to answer the questions.
Yes. So one question is your contact information. Can you either type it in the chat, or is there a slide that has the information or the
I didn't
or
unfortunately do a slide for that, so I will just put SBDC's phone number in the chat box. And even if you're not in our, yeah, we do Rockland, Westchester, and Putnam from my office. We'll tell you which SBDC you should call. No one in New York is more than 30 minutes from an SBDC, so we'll just get you the closest office for you.
Okay, great. And the last question I had was, do government agencies require suppliers to have audited financials?
No, they don't. In many cases, you don't have to even give the government your financials. A lot depends on what you're selling. And if it's construction and things like that, they're not going to get into financials, but they're going to get into bonding, which is where someone's going to ensure that you're going to finish the project. If you're putting like the tile up on the floors in my new office building and you're doing the lobby and it's $150,000, I'd probably want a bond that says you're going to do all the tile work and finish it up properly. So a lot depends on that. Audited financials, no, are not generally required. It's rare that they are, but in specific circumstances, when they're looking for a qualified contractor, there might be a question in terms of, can you actually handle this particular contract? They might ask for some financial information, but generally they don't ask for audited data, no.
Okay, that looks like that's all the questions in the chat.
Cool. And I did notice when I was typing the phone number there, somebody mentioned PTAC, Procurement Technical Assistance Centers. PTAC is another great program that's out there. They'll help you deal with the government. They'll help you identify opportunities. PTAC tends to focus more on the federal government, whereas like the Power Authority and SBDC and folks like that focus across the feds, the state, and localities. Our bid links program, actually, anybody that publishes electronically, we scan their requests. In New York State, it's most entities above including and above the level of village. So, like the Village of Suffern actually publishes their opportunities electronically. So if you're in Rockland County, that's one of these that would be included that would be looking at. So again, take advantage of every resource scan that's out there for you. You're already doing that by being at this event today. I'd like to thank the Power Authority for inviting me and SBDC to chat with you guys for a few, and hope it was a little bit helpful for you. And the other thing I can do, I'll throw my email in here real quick. If you guys have a question that I didn't get to today, or just have another question that you think of later, you can just email that to me and we'll get an answer back to you, and we'll get you a specific contact that can help you with your particular issue. So again, thanks very much, guys and gals, and have a great day and keep learning.